Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Second and Saints. John Hendricks alongside Ross Jackson. Good to be back after Thanksgiving. We took a little break, brief little hiatus, I guess, if you will. But Ross, man, how you doing? How was your Thanksgiving?
Good, man. Good. Nice and quiet. Didn't go anywhere. Didn't do anything. It was just a quiet day with a lot of food, which is a great way to spend a Thursday. How was
Ah,
yours?
oh man, the food was excellent. I had too much and too much as always, and the food was popping. Somebody made these like Oreo balls and stuff. It was just insane. Like there's just too much good food, but obviously, glad you had a good Thanksgiving. Hope everybody out there had a good Thanksgiving. But obviously, the elephant in the room, Saints come in. They were going to be tested in this game. We knew that,
Yeah.
right? Coming out of the bye week, could the Rizzi magic continue? It didn't. They lost 21-14. I think this is a winnable game that they let slip through their hands. Obviously, that's a big thing. I don't question the effort. I just think the execution obviously is lacking a bit. But look, before we talk and jump into some of that, we got to start with the big news, which is
Yeah.
the injuries, right? Taysom Hill being the big one. It was a knee injury. It didn't look good. Now it's kind of coming out like what we thought, feared to be season ending for Taysom Hill. Super unfortunate, but it's just another line of the laundry list of injuries this team has had to deal with this year.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, man. And look, this one's tough because the implications of a Taysom Hill injury at this point in the season are about more than just the rest of this year, right?
Yeah.
It's about a guy that's 35 years old over the course of the offseason, or going into 2025 rather, that has had injuries piling up and is in a role that is one that continuously utilizes him a bunch of different ways, gets him hit a lot, all these other things. Um, it's an unfortunate truth that now the question mark also becomes, where is Taysom Hill's role with the New Orleans Saints in 2025, and what does his
Yeah.
future look like with the team? You're about to have a change at head coach. You're probably potentially going to have a change at offensive play caller that will come along with that. Nothing to do with Clint Kubiak or his performance or anything like that. It's just the throes of the NFL and how it works. You get a new head coach. That head coach brings their friends, and they bring in new offensive play callers or defensive play callers, or are an offensive play caller, depending upon who the Saints hire. And so I think like that's the other thing that you're looking at here is that, yeah, this is costly for the Saints season. In my opinion, the loss of Taysom Hill is bigger than the actual loss to the Rams for this season. But now your question mark becomes the kind of ripple effect or the impact of this injury beyond 2024.
Yeah, and look, I have to go back and see ACLs. I'm sure it's possibly, like, I'm no doctor, but it doesn't look good. But if it's a torn ACL or something like that, I mean, you're talking about this is December. He might not get back into the football field till September. You know what I mean? Like just
Right.
depending, just playing this out as a 8-month recovery, and it just depends what the severity is. He's going under imaging. Him and Nick Saldiveri, who also left with a knee injury, also got carted off. That didn't look good either for him. But just sucks that that you have to keep dealing with that. But you bring up the point now that what's Taysom Hill's future, and look, I love the fact that the Saints fans got behind him.
Yeah,
Taysom
that was
chant
really cool.
in the Superdome, that was probably one of the best moments I've seen in the Superdome. Just seeing them come together, and it was obviously emotional a little bit for Derek Carr to talk about him post game. You could see him kind of getting a little emotional talking about Taysom Hill, and obviously he mentioned that this is bigger than football. I mean, Taysom Hill's a husband. He's got 2 kids, and so obviously you never wish this type of stuff would happen. I mean, you saw what happened with Trevor Lawrence on Sunday. That was
Right.
insane.
Jeez.
That particular hit, and I mean, just for somebody like Taysom Hill, I mean, he's a do it all weapon for this team. He plays personal protector, he plays tight end, he plays fullback, he plays running back, he plays kickoff team. I mean, he does so many things for you, and losing him is not a player that you just easily say, well, this guy is going to take his spot.
Right. Yeah, that's the tricky part here is like there's no Taysom Hill backup. There's nobody else
Right.
that looks at 200 plays in a playbook and knows what to do at wide receiver, tight end, running back, fullback, in line, in the slot, out wide, at quarterback on every single one of those plays. There's not a single player in the NFL that does that to the extent that Taysom Hill has been able to do that. And I think that's why he deserves to be in Hall of Fame conversation, not necessarily first ballot, but, to me, the Hall of Fame is something that's reserved for players that do things that no one else has done and that do things that no one else will do again. And I think Taysom Hill checks both of those boxes. That's the way that it should be. Of course, we'll see, obviously, voting for the Hall of Fame is just as much a popularity contest these days as Heisman Trophy winners are. But it's just, the reality of the situation. But like that's who Taysom Hill is. And that's the guy that you just lost for the rest of your season. When you don't really have, outside of Alvin Kamara, you don't have a second punch for the rest of the year. So now you've got, a game that you're going to try to be winning, or games that you're going to be trying to be winning through Alvin Kamara, and the occasional home run ball between Derek Carr and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Outside of that, you don't really have anything else consistent enough to be able to consistently build your offense off of. I think maybe we'll get to see more Dallin Holker out of all this, which could be positive to get a little bit of an evaluation for the team on who he is, where he is, how he contributes, all those other things. But man, like that does not make up for the loss of a guy like Taysom Hill that has been kind of the lifeblood of this team on the offensive side over the course of the past few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, one of one. I mean, there is nobody like him. And you mentioned the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but the thing that was told to me a long time ago, and is what they say is you can't tell the story of pro football without a particular player. And I don't think you can when you have factor in all the things that Taysom Hill has
Really
done
nice.
and all the things that he has done, like records since 1970s or something way back when
Yeah.
you're talking about all these historic players. I just think that conversation is going to be had. And look, you may not get it in the first ballot Hall of Famer, and of course there's still, presumably he's going to have still a future, obviously, but he is on the other side of 30, and so how long does he want to keep doing this after this injury? That's another thing to think about. And so it's unfortunate. And man, I hate the injuries that happen in this game. And the Saints, I mean, they lost Rashid Shaheed. They've lost Eric McCoy. They've lost Chris Olave. I mean, we go down the list. They lost Marshawn Lattimore for some time, Paulson Adebo on defense, Pete Werner something. Like, I think just about every player has been hurt, like every key cog. But, you can't just plug and play a guy like Taysom. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the Saints offense responds, because Clint Kubiak, I mean, he's a bread and butter staple of this offense because of so many different ways that you can use Taysom Hill to create deception or different looks or all this stuff. But man, I wish him the best and speedy recovery. And it's unfortunate the way it happened. I mean, a fourth down play, Saints go for it late in the fourth quarter, able to get the conversion, but you just knew with the way it went, it just didn't look good.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you saw immediately the impact of losing Taysom right after that, right? You had a 3rd and 4 that you weren't able to pick up in a short yardage situation. And you had a 4th and 2 where you have to go to the air. And then that, of course, leads to the, I guess it's considered a broken pass breakup, if you will, by Jared Verse there at the end of that game. But I mean, like that's the ripple effect of that injury right there playing out immediately in front of you. And so now you're having to figure out how to navigate. Okay, so how do you adjust on your offense? How do you have this player that does, the several players that now do the role of a Taysom Hill in your offense, while you're also still dealing with injuries on the offensive line, and you're compounding those injuries, and you're dealing with injuries. You don't have the wide receivers, as you mentioned, available to you. It's just, it's a tough situation to be in, man. It's a very, very tough situation to be in as the Saints try to move forward and try to stay alive in a division, the NFC South, that's keeping them alive here so far.
Yeah, Atlanta definitely has faltered. Tampa ended up winning against the Panthers, although I thought the Panthers, they fumbled that game
Well, they were
away.
going to eke it out, literally.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, that's just the way it goes. And then, for Taysom, I'm reminded of Nephi Sewell. I mean, he was a 9-month recovery. I mean, I think that's kind of what you're looking at. If it is ACL, again, we don't know the specific nature of it, but again, you could probably put 2 and 2 together. It doesn't look good, whatever the case may be. But, going back to the game, obviously that final sequence, Foster Moreau on Jared Verse, that's probably not your ideal blocking matchup, right? But at the same time, Carr saying, "Look, I had a read. It looked like it was Juwan Johnson. Needed just a half second, but look, I'm not going to sit here and try to say let me defend Derek Carr, which is not what I'm saying. But it shouldn't have came down to that because I think when
Mhm.
you look at the flow and especially what Darren Rizzi talked about, they look flat in the middle quarters. Like in the third quarter, they look horrible on both
Oh, they were
sides of the
rough
ball. They
there.
didn't look
Yeah.
good on front on offense. They didn't look good on defense. This run defense is bad. The pass rush, I mean, you got Matthew Stafford down twice, but I still think it's inconsistent. You're missing tackles offensively. I think this is the first game you see that the line wasn't maybe as strong as it has been in some aspects. But
Mhm.
look, they got a laundry list of problems that they're having to deal with, and I just don't like. I get it. You have a chance to win the game. They were going to go for two after if they made it in, but I don't think it just was that one particular play.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, you look at the first quarter of this game, um, the Saints defense forcing the Rams and the Saints offense for that matter, forcing the Rams to only take 3 offensive snaps, just over a minute of time of possession in that quarter. Then you look at the third quarter, where effectively everything got swapped, right? Got
Yeah,
flipped on New Orleans, and then all of a sudden the Rams dominated time of possession there. But the difference between those two is that while the Saints were dominating sort of the time of possession, they weren't putting points on the board. They were settling for a field goal, missed the 30, was it 36 yarder, if I remember correctly,
yeah,
for Blake Groupie, missed that, the opportunity to go ahead 2 possessions there. And then for the first time ever in a regular season game, the Saints defense actually shut out a Sean McVay offense in a first half. It's never been done before in a regular season game.
right.
But when you're only putting up 6 points in the meanwhile, which allows Sean McVay and that Rams offense to continue to build their run game and all these other things in the second half, especially with them getting the ball to open up the second half and then just like dominated that third quarter, it's challenging, right? I mean, technically, the Rams only scored 7 points in the third quarter, but it was the first play of the fourth quarter that they ended up getting their
Right.
second touchdown in that game, and they walked away with 3 red zone touchdowns. All 3 of their scores were on their 3 red zone possessions, and so I think those are the things you have to look at as well. It's not just that 1 4th and 2. Yeah, was that 4th and 2 the most important individual play of the game? Sure.
Yeah.
Like by the time that you got there, absolutely. But what told the story of this game started all the way back from the second quarter, in my opinion, or really
Yeah.
the first quarter.
Well, yeah, for sure. You're right. And Derek Carr took a little bit of ownership in that one too. Like you saying it was his fault. Like that was pretty crazy for him to say something like that. But I just looked at the third quarter. It was they Rams went on an 11-play drive that took 6:01. The Saints just ran a 3 and out. And I'm like, this isn't gonna work. Like you
Yeah.
can't do that. And this is the typical formula for this team is long drive defensively, give it up offensively, you just go out and run a 3 and out. That takes no time off the clock. Then you got to put a tired defense back on the field, all this other stuff. So it's just one of those is like you got to play consistently for fourth quarters. I mean, there were some issues here that obviously, we hadn't seen in the first couple of games. The substitution issues, 10
Hmm.
players on the field having to burn timeouts because of that. Like that's not, discipline. And I think the hard part is you're coming off the bye week. And so I think the
Yeah.
question we had or the thought is you had all this energy you channeled from the first 2 wins. You go into the bye, get a chance to rest up and stuff. And obviously, you weren't having guys like, Lucas Patrick from the ankle injury or Eric McCoy from the groin injury. But, for the most part, everybody was still energized, ready to go. And, at the end of it all, it's not enough. And to look like that, it's just a little bit tough. And so I think they know what's what. Again, mathematically, they're still alive. The division's the only way they're going to get there, right? But they've got to win football games, and this is a big one for them to lose. And I
Yeah.
get it. There's 5 games left in this season. I think that's right. My math, yeah,
Hmm.
4 and
That's
8.
right.
So yeah, 5 games left in the season, and so um, you just gotta stack some wins, and so. And I said 4 and 8, so that'd be 4 games, right? 4,
No,
8,
you're right.
no,
Yeah,
5.
because it's
Yeah,
the
sorry.
9 and 8 would be their best
I
finish.
need my medicine, y'all. Sorry. No, but yeah, 5 games left. You could win a couple of these, but again, you're going to have to beat the Packers. You're going to have to beat the Commanders. I think those are the 2 that you have to get up if you're going to set yourself up for the Bucks at the end of the season. But they
Right.
just got to win a game against the Giants. But at this point, I don't know. with the adversity that they have to battle, I don't know if they can pull it off now.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, and I don't know that the expectation should be that they do pull it off. I think it gets really exciting if they can and everything
Mhm.
like that. But I like my whole thing when it comes to what the Saints season is for the rest of the season. It's evaluate your roster, get to know what you've got, give Darren Rizzi a legitimate opportunity to audition for that head coach spot and everything like that, and learn what you learn over the course of the game. So the way that I summarize the New Orleans Saints in this game is that it's a game in which the Saints looked like what their roster is and look like who they are. The last couple of games have been them outperforming and overperforming those expectations. And that's super cool. That's great. That's super fun. It's great to watch those games, all those kinds of things. I thought the Saints were able to keep this game at least interesting by the time they got to the end of it. They might have struggled, but they haven't been boring, which is good. But I don't think that this is a team right now that without outperforming or overperforming itself is going to win games. That's just not kind of where this team is set up to be right now. And so for me, looking at the rest of the season really kind of comes down to what can you learn about your young talent? What can you learn about what pieces you do have? Do you have the ability to be able to produce without a Taysom Hill and a second option? Is Alvin Kamara enough? Because that might be what you've got in 2025, depending upon how the rest of the roster rolls out and how things change and all those other things. I think those are the things that you're focused on here for the rest of the season. And then if they end up putting themselves in position to be in postseason conversation, awesome, super fun, great. That could be really cool. They'll probably be one and done in the playoffs, but if they get there, awesome. But that's not the most important thing for the rest of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we got to talk plenty about that rebuild, or they call it retool, whatever you want to call it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot that has to be done, and there's a lot to clean up. And we're going to talk about some of that probably and more from this game right after the break. Hey folks, John Hendricks here, Second and Saints. Wanted to talk to you quickly about Underdog because it is the place to play if you're a sports fan looking to win money while watching sports. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. Compete against other players by just selecting higher or lower on 2 or more player stats, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn every touchdown into a win with Underdog. This season, Underdog is going to be running a special promo or bonus almost every single day, like profit boosts, discounts, or free picks. Plus, all new users get a free pick. You could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats like passing yards, interceptions, touchdowns, and much more. Create entries with all football selections or mix and match across your favorite sports. Underdog puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the win now button to cash out whenever you want. And with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose. With Underdog's double flex option, you can even take 2 L's and still have your entry to be a win. So go download the app today and use code SECONDSAINTS to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's code SECONDSAINTS. Now here comes the legal jargon. Must be 18 or older, 19 and older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 and older in Colorado for some games, 21 and older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Back here on Second and Saints, John Hendricks alongside Ross Jackson. Ross, before we went to the break, we are talking obviously about the future of this team, but obviously just looking at today and looking at how things evolved, I guess, because the first half you pointed out again, first time Sean McVay's team gets shut out, right? The last time they had that was in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, and insert asterisk, side footnote here or whatever you want to call it, but I thought they did a nice job there, but then the second half, Kyron Williams goes off, Blake Corum goes off. I mean, it is one of those things where they were averaging well over 5 yards a carry. I mean, look, Kyron only had 15 carries for 107 yards, and he was averaging well over 6 yards a carry. And so, to me, it's hard. And you lost Tyron in this game too, with a shoulder injury. Doesn't seem like it's anything serious, but what's going on with this run defense? Because it was hard against, some of these teams. They looked like they did better against Nick Chubb, but it's just Bijan Robinson the week before that. It's just been inconsistent. Is it the interior? Is it the assignments? I mean, Cam Jordan had a kind of a pulse on some of it, but what's going on with this run defense?
Yeah, the thing that stands out to me about the run defense is that anytime you ask any player or coach about what the issues or challenges have been in that area, it's a list of issues. It's
Yeah.
gap integrity, it's run fits, it's tackling, it's winning at the line of scrimmage, all those other things. And we look at like the team or the Saints right now, one of the worst teams in the NFL when it comes to yards before contact in run defense, meaning that they're giving up the most yards or amongst the most yards in the league before even getting a hand on defenders on a per run basis, runners on a per run basis. And I think that's huge. I think that the fact of the matter is that like the Saints run defense just is not good. And that can be from a personnel standpoint, but I personally think it's got a lot more to do with something's not working scheme and system wise, because we've seen each of the last 3 years. 2022 they were 24th in the NFL against the run. Last year, they were 22nd in the NFL against the run. This year, they're currently 24th in the NFL before this game against the run. They'll likely fall a spot or two after this game, I would imagine. And so for me, like it's one thing when you have to change hands from one defensive play caller to another defensive play caller in a season, but when the system that's changing hands was already failing in that aspect, it's not going to get better just because it changed hands at some point. You know what I mean? And so I think that like it's a little bit of a spaghetti at the wall, throw a dart type situation in terms of what it is that has been the issue for the Saints run defense. And that makes it really hard to address when that target is constantly moving, because one game it's tackling, another game it's the one reliable thing that the Saints have been able to do in terms of limiting the run has been over on the offensive side being their best run defense, which is putting points on the board. And the Saints failed to do that on the offensive side until the fourth quarter today.
Yeah, and look, I thought Alvin Kamara, aside the two uncharacteristic drops, I mean, I thought he ran the ball really
Another
well today.
outstanding game. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he just puts the team on his back at sometimes, and he just does his thing. But the run defense, man, it's been a theme. It's been a common theme for years now. I can remember going back the years, and again, these coaches as well as these players are being evaluated in this final stretch.
Yep.
We've talked about maybe the need to go for a wide receiver in the first round. I mean, they might need to get a run plugger at this point in the first round. I mean, there's just so many things that you have to worry about. And, do you keep some of your guys that are coming back on contract, or you just blow it all up and change some major pieces? And again, who's going to be running the defense? Who's going to be running the defensive line? I mean, there's all sorts of variables here, but bottom line is this ain't it. This ain't getting it done. And even if you get into playoffs, most of the teams that are going to be there, like a Detroit or a Green Bay or some of these other teams, they can run the ball and then some, right? Like, and Vikings are another team. Aaron Jones, Josh Jacobs, that two-headed monster up in Detroit with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I mean, they are teams that can run the football. So, like you said, even if they were somehow to be able to squeeze into the postseason with the division, they'll probably just get blown out in the first game. I mean, of course, anything can happen, right? Angels in the outfield. Shout out to them because I just saw that movie. but it's just the reality. And again, when you play inconsistent like that, where one game you look good, next game you don't look good, one game this happens, like you said, tackling is the issue, gap integrity is the issue. It's a sign of a larger problem.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if it's the way that it's being coached. I don't know that it is the way that it's being coached, because there's also been like 3 different people that have coached different elements of it, right? Dennis Allen coaching his own system, Joe Woods coaching Dennis Allen's system, Todd Grantham coaching the defensive line, now Brian Young coaching the defensive line, and still the same issues, right? And one of the big things that you see constantly is the Saints defensive line not winning at the line of scrimmage, walking backwards at the line of scrimmage, right? Or getting walked back at the line of scrimmage, particularly on the interior. That's been the truth for the Saints since back in 2022. And so it kind of makes you wonder how much Ryan Nielsen was really the, kind of key to the run defense a couple of years, going back to 2021 before he had to split focus and do the co-defensive coordinator weird thing that the Saints tried to do their first year with Dennis Allen. And so it kind of makes you wonder, like, okay, is that where like the impetus for the issue is that they haven't had the defensive line coach that apparently made the team who they were over the course of that, the successful run defensive years that they had. I don't know. I mean, you look at the years before Ryan Nielsen, you look at the years after Ryan Nielsen, and there's a trend. There's a trend there. It's absolutely there. And so it makes me wonder how much he was a big part of it, whatever it might be. And so maybe it's not being coached well at the position, well enough at the position level. Maybe it's a scheme issue from the top. And maybe there were some things that Nielsen was correcting in the way that he was coaching, maybe not purposely correcting, but was correcting in the way that he was coaching. Whatever it is, like, this needs a major overhaul. The run defense does. And that doesn't mean the personnel necessarily. That means it can, but that also means the scheme. It means the system. It means the coaching. It means all those other things, the prep, whatever it might be. I think all those things are a part of that overhaul too, because there's only so much you're going to be able to do in terms of roster turnover this offseason. It's like you're going to go and be big spenders in free agency all of a sudden. You can't, so they got to start somewhere.
Yeah. And look, not that I'm going to be that guy and jump ahead, but you play the NFC West next year and the AFC East. There's some really talented backs there. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, Devin Achane. Of course, who knows about him? James Cook, Josh Allen duo. I mean, just to name a few. Kenneth Walker over in Seattle. I mean, I don't want to leave out anybody, but again, there's so much talent coming in, and this isn't just going to go away. Plus, you got Bijan Robinson in your division, and Bucky Irving looks good with the Bucks. I mean, he just had a heck of a game against the Panthers today,
and saved one fumble. Like Chuba Hubbard's looked good this season too.
Yep. And they got Jonathan Brooks too in the waiting there, but they obviously like Chuba enough to give him a nice little deal. But again, this isn't just a problem that's going to magically go away because of the talent or like the opponent you play. It's only going to get worse in some aspects. So they got to figure this thing out. And run defense was one thing. Again, you look at some of the other plays. I thought they did a really nice job on Puka Nacua in the first half. I think overall a really good job on Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp the entire game. But when it mattered, Alante's pass interference call, I know that's got a lot of question marks on it and such, but and the big play to DeMarcus Robinson was a big one too. But I thought overall they did a pretty good job on those two. You couldn't totally take Nacua out of this game, but the Rams got him going in the second half. And look, Stafford got going too. The pass rush, again, you mentioned the push. There was times where I don't remember what the exact scenario was, but I said no pass rush because they all just like got stymied and pushed back. Like there was nothing there for the defensive line. And so that's a problem. And so I think, this team is going to have to look heavy into the trenches in the offseason and really do some hard evaluations on what they have. And they're going to have to figure it out. And they've got some free agents to make some decisions on and, a whole plethora of decisions to make. But again, that's not going to happen until you figure out what your coaching situation is, who you're keeping and retaining for your assistants. I mean, we're almost there. I mean, we're practically a month and some change away from all of this happening. So that's the good news, I guess, in some aspects, is that we're almost to that point where we're going to have more of those conversations and figure out what's going to happen.
Yeah. And then look, it's going to be another season of question marks in 2025, and then looking to the off season for 2026 to see how they continue to adjust. Like this isn't going to be a one and done type situation. Like this is going to be a process for New Orleans to get through. So it's going to take some patience. But I mean, if they can do what teams like the Texans and the Commanders have done and get lucky and get, an extra, get a year ahead of themselves or something like that. But otherwise you're looking at like a Lions type, target of many years of getting everything right and taking the time to establish the culture and find the right players and all these other things. Like it's going to take some time. So even when we do get into the conversations this offseason, it's not going to be a one-off season conversation. There's no doubt about that. I think the thing that you can take a little bit of solace in though as a fan is Brian Rizzi. When it comes to that interior of the defensive line, I thought Nathan Shepard actually played a really nice game in this game as well. And really, I thought Colin had some nice moments too. I don't know how much of it is the personnel versus how much of it is the other stuff. But anyway, if you're looking at the young pieces that you can build around, Brian Rizzi having 6.5 sacks on the season is pretty outstanding. He's not been as impactful in the run game as he has been in the passing game, but you look at the one defensive lineman that felt like he showed up the most in this game, particularly on third downs, and it was Brian Rizzi. And I think that's a major win for New Orleans, who invested a first-round pick on an interior defensive lineman, which not a lot of teams are willing to do, right? Looking at like positional value and all those other things, premier versus non-premier positions, yada, yada, everything. But they went that route. And I think that they hit with a guy like Brian Rizzi big time. The big thing is, can you complement what he gives you as a pass rusher by putting the run defense around him? Not to go back to that conversation or rehash that conversation again, but I do think that that's the thing, right? You want to build around Brian Rizzi, but you got to provide the complements that can do some of the other stuff around him in the process.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw this out too. They miss a guy like Malcolm Roach.
Oh, yeah.
He was a guy
Malcolm
that
Roach.
was I mean, I remember Malcolm Brown. You were talking about the old
Yep.
defensive line, Sheldon Rankin's in there too. But, again, this is just a cold hard fact is that you're going to have to make those decisions. I mean, the reality is Shepard and Saunders are both going into the third year of their contract. They could technically cut ties with him. It depends on what they feel with John Ridgeway. It depends on what they feel with Christian Boyd. I mean, he's been inactive because they traded for Ridgeway and they got all four of those guys. But, does Christian Boyd take a leap? I mean, they need their young guys to take major leaps because this is what this team is mostly comprised of, is a lot of young players who are going to have to be in roles that maybe they're, I wouldn't say not ready for, but going to be thrust in roles where, look, you're going to have to do some growing up really quickly, and there's going to be pain points with that. Just like with Alante outside. I mean, he's as maybe the number one corner. I mean, there's going to be some pain with it, but I think he's bounced back with some good plays and stuff. But same thing with Kool-Aid McKinstry. I mean, you're just going to go through some of these bumps and bruises. But what the biggest thing for me is, do you have the right teachers in the building to help improve it and to get it? And so again, if it's a defensive coach that comes in here like an Aaron Glenn, we know his strength is the secondary, right? And so that could help. But what do you put around you? What do you do in that case? And so I don't know. I don't know. It depends on what direction they go. And there's so many different coaching candidates to look at. I mean, I know you've talked about them. I've wrote about them and stuff. And it's really exciting in some aspects that the Saints, I don't want to say they have a buffet of options at the point, but the buffet that they do have, it's kind of like I don't know, what's this? It's a good little seafood buffet. It ain't the casino buffet.
Yeah.
It ain't like, Ryan's buffet or anything. Not that I'm just name dropping. I'm just putting stuff out there. But it's a nice little seafood buffet.
I was waiting for you to come through with the Boomtown buffet for a second.
Oh, Lord, man. Yeah, from 200 tiers. Rank the tiers. I might even throw CC's in. Shout out to my college days.
Oh, sure.
UL Lafayette. But yeah, that was my pizza buffets.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, it's just a lot to figure out, and then they're gonna have to figure it out. And again, Darren Rizzi, do you think a game like today hurts his chances overall if he can rebound the next several games, or do you just think that like he's kind of still the bookmark right now, like he's just kind of holding his place at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's one that you can bounce back from. I don't think that this loss puts Darren Rizzi in a situation to where he's no longer going to be considered a candidate. I think he's going to be considered a candidate. How serious he's considered is unfortunately going to be based entirely upon how the entire games that he gets. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's going to be all of a sudden results based. But I do think that is going to be a big part of it, right? Like you're going to know if Darren Rizzi is a viable candidate by season's end or at season's end. And that's an unfortunate situation. Like that's tough. That's really, really tough for a guy like Riz, who has a lot of respect from the coaches, from the players, from the organization as a whole, that he's basically having to audition with a team that is not nearly what, like if you ask them, hey, who's going to be on your roster and who's going to be your starting, name any position come week 14, they would not name this collection of players. And unfortunately, that's the collection of players that Darren Rizzi's effectively having his audition with. But I do think that also tells you a little bit to where, if they do finish with a winning record over the course of his 8 games, it says a lot of positive things about what Darren Rizzi was able to do in terms of helping. Because I think the mark of a very good football coach, especially one that's not calling plays, is, can you lead your team to performing better than the roster that it has? And I think that's something we watched the Detroit Lions do for a couple of seasons before they became the perennial playoff team that they've become. And I think that that's something that would speak very highly in favor of Darren Rizzi if that ends up being the situation by season's end. But I don't think that we can say right now that one loss to a team that, like, everyone kind of expected the Saints to lose to anyway. Like, if we would have, if we would have done a preview, I would have picked the Rams to win this game.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's enough to say that Darren Rizzi is no longer a candidate at this time.
Yeah, I think it's premature to do that. And it's funny, I think it was you that asked the question to Carr about, guys like Kevin Austin Jr., who he also had a really good game too. Like, he's been balling out, and we talked about him in training camp a good bit, but like, he has a receiving core essentially of him, Dante Pettis, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and Cedric Wilson Jr. I mean, this was not who he would have guessed in a million years. Nobody would have guessed this would have been the receiving core and when we're going into week 14 of the season. But, Valdes-Scantling, he's played pretty well. And I mean, the guy hurt his average by getting like an 8-yard reception, but he made up for it. We're having a big touchdown play. But again, like you said, that's not a sustainable, thing where Alvin Kamara just runs the ball and you just throw it deep to Marquez Valdes-Scantling. You just got to find some extra success there, and maybe you'll see a Dallin Holker emerge. Maybe they get Lucas Patrick back at left guard. That's another one. Do they get Eric McCoy back? That's going to be another one to figure out and see where they go. And then defensively, can they rebound? And they're going to be tested because they got Tyrone Tracy against the Giants, and that's another explosive runner who can really do some damage.
Yep,
I don't care who the quarterback is.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah, and in fact, look, I think the New York Giants had the worst quarterback room coming into the season. All told, between those three guys that they have over there, that are like guys that can throw footballs, but I don't know about like where they are in terms of like being like game, managers or leaders and motivators and all those other things. Like, they can throw, but I don't know much else about them from that perspective. But like, when it comes to who they have, whether it's Tommy Cutlets or whether it's Drew Lock, you're going to want to run the football with those guys under center, and you can, like, you're going to walk into this game if you're the New York Giants, go, okay, we can run the football against this New Orleans Saints defense. So I think that becomes the next thing. And look, I think too that the other reason why it becomes so imperative that New Orleans kind of gets that run game figured out is that you look across the NFL, the trend right now is 2-back sets. It's multiple tight ends on the field. It's run heavy sets. And yes, a lot of teams will still pass out of those run heavy sets. Take the Saints as an example there, but we're watching now the tide turn from the heavy passing attack to the heavy rushing attack with the complementary passing attack. And I think that's something that is kind of imperative for the Saints to kind of be ready to combat by season's end.
Yep. I mean, it's only going to get harder. I mean, Tyrone Tracy, and then you got the Commanders with Jaden Daniels, the dual threat, if you will, and Brian Robinson, and maybe they'll get Austin Eckler back in that one too. I'm not sure. And then we got the Raiders and then the Bucks. I mean, this is kind of crunch time, I guess, if you will, quote unquote. And so for this team, it's, just enjoy the ride, whatever that ride may be. It might be the Hulk from Universal Studios, or it might be the teacup ride, or it might be just a little baby ride. I don't know, but at this point, it's a bad loss for this team to take. But again, it was a lot that you can dissect and take from this game and say, okay, well, there's a few reasons why maybe they weren't the team we thought that they could be under Rizzi. It just shows more about the flaws within the team, I think, personally. But look, they were in it for 4 quarters in some aspects. Like, energy was there and stuff like that. I don't question the effort or energy, but the result is not what you need it to be. And so for the Saints, it's a harsh reality that they got to deal with. And, it's unfortunate they had to do it against the fans in the stands, and now they go on the road, but that's how it goes, I guess, in this NFL these days. You never know, any given Sunday, right?
Yeah. It's tough, man. It's tough.
Yeah. Well, anything about the game that I didn't kind of mention that you wanted to highlight? I will say this before I do. Two really awesome special teams plays today. Nephi Sewell should
Oh,
deserve some love. A kick
yeah,
return coverage, and then JT Gray and Rico Payton on that punt coverage being
man,
like step and step. Those
dude.
two like need some shout out love there. And Blake Groupie tackle, even though it didn't count, but
Right. That was so. I love Blake Groupie just being like, "You're not gonna jump over me." Like
right.
I'm not going to let that happen. So
Uh-uh.
I was like, "Good on." I was like, "Good on you, Blake. You do
Yeah.
not deserve that kind of disrespect." Um, Not necessarily. It's not entirely tied to the game, but something to watch. Alvin Kamara is now only 106 yards away from rushing yards away from his first 1,000-yard rushing season.
Mm.
Now, after going over 100 rushing yards again today, this is the 11th time in his career that he's gone over 100 rushing yards in a game. I think that's tied for fifth most, if I remember correctly
They
from the
said
press
with
box.
Ruben Mays. Yeah, they said
Yeah,
it was tied with Ruben Mays.
what a name. And then
Mhm.
like awesome. And so something to watch with them going to New York next week. I don't know where the Giants sit in terms of run defense. I can pull that up real quick, but man, Alvin Kamara finally finally in a situation to where he could get over 100 rushing yards, and the Giants unsurprisingly awful against the run, 30th in the NFL. So real opportunity there for Alvin Kamara to potentially go over 1,000 yards rushing before or by the 13th game of the season. Pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Good for him too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
knock on wood, hopefully nothing happens, but all signs are pointing to it happening. So scenes just been all sorts of wrong. And it was supposed to be so different to go to the training camp,
I
first two
know.
games. I mean, I just think about how we got to this point and it's winding down. It's just crazy how football is. And
Yep.
sad part is it's again looking like New Orleans is going into a four straight losing season. And they got to pull themselves out of it. But the problem is, I just don't know if you can just pull out of pull a rabbit out of your hat for next season, no matter who you put in
Right.
place and what you do, because there's other factors that have to be addressed and stuff. But I don't know. It's probably a story for a different day or conversation for a different day. Well, Ross, as we wrap up here, man, obviously what's coming up on Locked On and what you got coming up on LouisianaSports.net.
Yeah, I think on both fronts, the main focus for the next couple of days is going to be Taysom Hill, and just
Yeah.
kind of where the Saints go from here with him. How this impacts the season from a numbers perspective, what this potentially means for them over the course of the offseason. So really going to kind of dive into that. We're also doing like the typical stuff too. We'll look at like Pro Football Focus grades on Monday, taking a look at like the stats to know from the game and all the other stuff, film breakdowns, everything as well. So typical post-game coverage stuff, but man, I think a big heavy slant towards Taysom Hill and what this means for the Saints as they move forward. What about you over at Saints News Network?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Losing Taysom Hill is detrimental to this team, even if
Yeah.
he was out just for a couple weeks. That's a big thing to have. And so, but yes, of course, post game coverage, snap counts, looking more into this game, and then just looking a little bit more at how this team and where that stacks up for the rest of the season. Obviously, fans are going to want to know what draft position they have, what the potential path to the playoff could be. I mean, there's all those scenarios. The main thing I would just tell you, they just have to win their games first and then worry about it. But if you want to get wrapped up in scenarios, we'll go down that road. I'll write it and I'll put it out there for you guys so you know. But all the normal stuff for sure that you'll get on Saints News Network. So stay tuned for all of that and plenty more. Ross, it's good to have us back together on the show, man.
Yes, man.
I know we had the bye week. We didn't really do anything. And then Thanksgiving, things got crazy and all that stuff. But, I'm glad to have you back. That's for sure.
It
Glad to
feels
be back.
normal again. It feels normal
Yeah.
again. Getting to talk to my
Yeah.
buddy John. This is the way it's supposed to be. So I'm glad.
For
I'm with
sure.
you.
Definitely, man. Appreciate it. And appreciate all you guys for tuning in and gals for tuning in. So don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button, all that fun stuff. Plenty more to come when it comes to the Saints. Stay locked in here and locked on for Saints coverage and LouisianaSports.net and Saints News Network. On behalf of Mr. Ross Jackson, I am John Hendricks signing out for Second and Saints. Y'all have a good one. Stay safe and enjoy this cool weather if you're down south.
Love you.